All right, sailor. Close the logbook, dim the lantern, and let the sea do the talking tonight. If you've got a fan running, leave it on. If it's raining, even better. And if you're lying in bed, congratulations, you've already done the hardest part of being a sailor, staying still. Tonight, we're talking about the strange jobs that existed at sea. And there were plenty. See, most people imagine life aboard an old ship as a grand romantic adventure. Salty wind, heroic captains, treasure maps, that sort of thing. But the truth? The vast majority of sailors weren't charting destiny. They were just trying to keep their socks dry. And the jobs, oh, the jobs. Half of them sounded like punishments invented by a creative sadist. Someone had to feed the cannons. Someone else had to feed the crew. Someone had to clean the decks, patch the sails, mend the rats, chase the rats, cook the rats. Occasionally, all before breakfast. Ships, you see, were floating ecosystems. Every plank, every rope, every barrel of water had its own custodian. And because sailors had the collective attention span of a drunken seagull, the captains had to assign very specific duties. That's how you end up with things like the powder monkey, the loblolly boy, the purser, the cooper, and the tragically underpaid rat catcher. We'll get to all of them tonight. Some of these poor souls risk their lives every hour. Others risk nothing but chronic boredom and dysentery. But together, they kept the ship moving, barely, through centuries of salt and chaos. Now, as we drift through these tales, remember, this isn't a history lecture. It's a slow, rolling tide of oddities, a bedtime logbook of the weirdest people ever to earn a paycheck on the water. So lie back, listen to the creak of the hull, the soft hiss of the waves against the boards, and try not to think too hard about what might be living between the planks. Let's begin then with one of the smallest and most unfortunate jobs ever invented, the powder monkey. If you were a young boy in the 18th century, and particularly unlucky, someone might decide you were small enough to work on a warship. The job title alone, powder monkey, should have been a warning. But desperate families didn't ask many questions, and desperate captains didn't offer many answers. Powder monkeys were the children who carried gunpowder from the ship's magazines, dark, airless chambers deep below deck, up to the cannons during battle. They scurried through narrow corridors with canvas cartridges in hand, while cannonballs screamed overhead. Their instructions were simple: don't trip, don't spill, and absolutely don't sneeze near an open flame. Most of them didn't last long, not because they were bad at the job, but because being fast and brave doesn't help when your workplace occasionally explodes. Imagine it, you're 12 years old, barefoot, deaf in one ear, and running gunpowder through a wooden maze, while grown men are screaming for blood. And you thought your first job was rough. Of course, some survived long enough to become gunners themselves. Others went deaf, or mad, or both, which, in fairness, wasn't unusual for sailors of any rank. Still, powder monkeys were indispensable. Without them, a ship of the line was just a very large, very angry piece of furniture. Now, you'd think things could only improve from there, but the sea has a gift for inventing worse fates. Take the loblolly boy, essentially the ship's nurse. Sounds respectable, doesn't it? It wasn't. The loblolly boy assisted the ship's surgeon, meaning he held down screaming men during amputations, stirred medicinal sludge, and cleaned up whatever the surgeon threw at him. They were also responsible for maintaining the sawbones bucket, which is exactly what it sounds like. And yes, it sloshed. You had to be calm, sturdy, and deeply unbothered by the smell of boiled limbs. And if the surgeon was drunk, which he usually was, you might be performing surgery yourself by sundown. Still, the job came with a silver lining. Lob-lolly boys didn't have to climb rigging, haul ropes, or stand watch in freezing rain. They just had to avoid fainting. And then there was the cooper, the barrel maker. Every drop of water, beer, salted pork, or gunpowder had to be stored in barrels, and barrels leaked if not maintained. So the cooper's job was to tap, tighten, and seal hundreds of them, all by hand, using nothing but wooden mallets and hope. They were the unsung heroes of hydration. If a cooper did his job well, the crew lived. If not, they drank brine, or worse, the ship's beer supply spoiled, and nothing turned sailors mutinous faster than warm, sour ale. I once served with a cooper named Henshaw. Good man, lazy as driftwood. He once claimed he could fix a barrel just by glaring at it. A week later, half our provisions tasted like seawater. He retired early. Now, before you start feeling sorry for these poor souls, remember, it wasn't all misery. There were small joys at sea, songs, stories, the occasional stolen nap. Even a powder monkey might find himself laughing between battles, tossing biscuits to gulls, or learning his first curse word in 5 languages. The sea took much, but it gave camaraderie, that strange, stubborn bond forged by shared discomfort. Still, if you ever find yourself complaining about your day job, remember there was once a position where "don't explode" was a core performance metric. And that's only the first watch, sailor. The sea had stranger roles still, some blessed by luck, others cursed by necessity. Next, we'll meet the rat catcher, the purser, and the cat-o'-nine-tails enthusiast known as the boatswain's mate. But that's for the next tide. For now, breathe deep. Salt, rain, memory. The deck is quiet. The lantern swings. The ship keeps her own slow heartbeat. You're safe aboard. Now, sailor, if you've ever wondered who ran things on a ship, you might say the captain, but you'd be wrong. The real master of the vessel was the rat catcher, and every ship had one, whether anyone admitted it or not. Rats, you see, were the unofficial crew. They came aboard free of charge, ate like kings, and never once contributed to morale. They gnawed through rope, spoiled rations, and carried more diseases than the surgeon's manual had pages. So, the rat catcher's job was simple. Make life unpleasant for the rodents without burning down the ship in the process. He came armed with traps, poison, and, if lucky, a cat that hadn't given up on life yet. But most cats at sea quickly realized the futility of the arrangement. They'd kill a rat or two, get seasick, then spend the rest of the voyage judging everyone from a beam. The rat catcher, meanwhile, scurried through the lower decks like some sort of nocturnal priest. He knew every crack, every pipe, every dark corner where claws scraped at night. And though he was often mocked by the rest of the crew, when the biscuits started disappearing or the grain sacks began writhing, suddenly he was the most popular man aboard. He slept near the bilge, the lowest, dampest part of the ship, and the rats kept him company, whether he liked it or not. Some ships even paid a bounty per tail, which led to creative accounting. I once heard of a rat catcher who started breeding his own rats to collect extra pay. Ingenious, if morally flexible. His work, though grim, kept the crew alive. Rats chewed through water casks, and once your fresh water leaked into the hold, that was that. Thirst is an ugly thing at sea. Men have fought wars over a half-full barrel, so while everyone else was climbing rigging or polishing cannons, the rat catcher fought an invisible war, one scratch at a time. He wasn't the only odd specialist on board, mind you. There were barber surgeons who bled sailors to balance humours, musicians who were also sometimes executioners, multi-talented fellows, and the cook's mate, whose primary duty was not to scream when the galley stove caught fire, which it did hourly. But none of them earned the particular blend of pity and awe reserved for the rat catcher. He lived surrounded by enemies, slept beside his work, and smelled permanently of wet rope and victory. If you ever find yourself feeling insignificant, remember, someone once got paid in biscuits to wage eternal war against vermin in a floating wooden coffin, and he still showed up for work. That, sailor, is perseverance. All right, take a breath. The ship's quiet again. The rats are asleep, the traps are set, and our next tale takes us a deck higher into the treacherous world of accounting. If the rat catcher ruled the shadows, the purser ruled the numbers, and both were equally distrusted. The purser's job was to handle the ship's supplies, wages, and ledgers, which meant he controlled the one thing more volatile than gunpowder: money. He was part quartermaster, part banker, part magician, able to make a sailor's pay disappear with the stroke of a quill. Most pursers were honest enough to keep the ship from starving, but not so honest that they died poor. It was expected that a purser would adjust the books in his favor, a tradition passed down proudly like scurvy. Now, don't mistake him for a villain. He was simply practical. In an age before calculators, keeping exact accounts on a rolling deck was nearly impossible. So the numbers were approximate, and if a few extra barrels of rum vanished under spoilage, well, that's just maritime math. The purser's cabin smelled of ink, salt, and quiet guilt. He kept chests full of parchment, each one blotched with rum stains and mysterious deductions. I knew one who swore he could balance a ledger by intuition alone. A sixth sense for solvency, he called it. The captain called it theft, but the purser was untouchable. No ship could sail without one, because someone had to argue with the Navy about biscuit counts when they docked. Now, life at sea required its share of moral maintenance as well, which is where the parson came in. Or, when a parson wasn't available, whatever sailor could fake piety convincingly. A ship's chaplain wasn't just a preacher, he was a therapist, undertaker, and occasional drinking buddy. He'd conduct Sunday prayers, bless cannons before battle, and deliver sermons about humility while everyone else nursed hangovers. The trick was maintaining dignity while being completely ignored. He could quote scripture all he wanted. The boatswain still swore louder. Yet he kept the crew tethered to faith, or at least to guilt, which was close enough. When storms hit, even the boldest atheists found religion fast. Suddenly, The parson's quarters were full of repentant sailors, promising lifelong virtue in exchange for one more sunrise. Most of them broke those promises by breakfast. And then there was the petty thief. Not an official job, but practically an institution. Every ship had one. He wasn't evil, just opportunistic. A bar of soap here, a coin there, a little shaving off the purser's rum ration for personal morale. Sometimes he got caught. Then he'd be flogged by the boatswain's mate, whose enthusiasm for discipline could make thunder sound apologetic. But flogging was as routine as rain. The thief would yelp, swear eternal honesty, and be back at it within the week. Ships ran on repetition, of waves, of work, of mistakes. You could punish a man, but you couldn't change the tide. What made these odd jobs so strangely human was how necessary they were. The rat catcher kept hunger at bay. The purser kept the illusion of order. The parson kept the illusion of virtue. And the thief, well, he kept everyone humble. I've seen captains who thought they ruled the sea undone by a single missing bottle of rum. One night in the Caribbean, ours went missing from the stores. The captain accused the purser accused the thief accused the rats, and the rats, bless them, said nothing. By morning, the bottle turned up half empty behind the ship's bell. The captain blamed the wind and called it divine intervention. No one argued. That's how ships worked. Chaos balanced delicately on superstition, paperwork, and just enough rum to keep everyone polite. All right, sailor. You've met the accountant, the preacher, and the pickpocket. Not exactly the Holy Trinity, but they kept the ship afloat, spiritually, financially, and barely morally. In our next watch, we'll meet the loudest man alive, the boatswain's mate, and the loneliest, the lookout, perched above it all in the crow's nest. But that's for the next tide. For now, let the waves do the work. You're safe aboard. Every ship had its own personality, and if you listened long enough, you could hear it breathing. The creak of the planks, the whistle of the wind through the rigging, the gentle slap of waves against the hull, all of it spoke. But if there was one man louder than the ship itself, it was the boatswain's mate. He was the voice of the vessel, the enforcer of discipline, and the human embodiment of thunder. You could hear him halfway to the next ocean, barking orders like cannon fire, his whistle slicing through the wind. The boatswain's mate had one mission: to keep everyone else miserable in the name of order. He wasn't cruel, at least not intentionally. He simply believed that the sea respected volume, and perhaps it did, because his word carried farther than any captain's command ever could. The captain spoke in strategy, the mate spoke in procedure, but the boatswain's mate spoke in volume and vocabulary that could peel paint. Now, it wasn't all shouting. He was also responsible for the ropes, sails, anchors, and pretty much every piece of the ship that could break, stretch, or snap. He trained the deckhands, maintained the gear, and supervised floggings, a grim but routine part of shipboard life. And oh, how he loved his cat-o'-nine tails, that infamous whip of 9 knotted cords. He didn't enjoy the punishment itself. He enjoyed the precision. 5 strokes for stealing bread, 10 for blasphemy, 20 for pretending not to hear me, he'd say. A true craftsman in his way. I once knew a boatswain's mate named Red Jack. Massive fellow, voice like a cannonball rolling downstairs. He claimed he could make the sea go quiet just by glaring at it. One night during a storm, he stood at the bow, arms crossed, and shouted, "That's enough!" The thunder paused for exactly 1 second, and he's been bragging about it ever since. Despite the yelling, most sailors respected him. He was the glue between the officers and the crew, the one who made sure orders actually became action. Without him, chaos spread faster than mold in the galley. Still, when his shift ended, the silence he left behind was almost holy. Now, if the boatswain's mate ruled by noise, his opposite lived far above, in solitude and wind. The lookout in the crow's nest, the highest man on the ship, literally and often spiritually. The crow's nest was nothing more than a wooden barrel nailed to the top of the mainmast, swaying 90 feet above the deck. Up there, the world was smaller, simpler, just sky, sea, and the occasional gull that came too close. The lookout's job was to watch, to see what others could not. Land, ships, storms, or sometimes nothing at all for weeks on end. Imagine it, sailor. You're perched above the world, wind freezing your face, the horizon wrapped in fog. Your legs ache from balancing, your throat's dry, and your only company is the slow sway of the mast. You start thinking strange thoughts up there about how the ocean looks like the sky, and the sky looks like the ocean turned upside down. About how maybe they're both just reflections of each other, and you're the coin flipping between them. I remember one quiet night years ago, the sea like glass, the stars so bright they seemed to hum. Our lookout, a quiet lad named Finch, called down softly, "Sir, do you ever think the stars are ships too? Just sailing upside down?" I told him, "Aye, and they're probably better paid." He laughed, and that laugh carried all the way down to deck, gentle as a gull's wing. The lookout's life was lonely, but it had its peace. Up there, you could think without interruption. You could hear your own thoughts, even if they weren't kind. Some men came down wiser, others came down unhinged. The sea doesn't discriminate. Together, the boatswain's mate and the lookout were the lungs of the ship, one shouting orders into the world, the other whispering warnings from above. Noise and silence, discipline and dreaming, the two halves of every sailor's heart. All right, sailor, the night's deep now. The waves are softer, the lamps dimmer. One last tale before we rest. A visit to the lowest deck of all, where voices hum through the timbers. Down below the decks, past the cabins and stores, lies the hold, the heart of any ship. Dark, damp, echoing, and eternally smelling of salt, tar, and secrets. That's where the holdmaster worked, one of the strangest and most misunderstood jobs at sea. He kept track of everything the ship carried, crates, barrels, cannonballs, even passengers if the captain was feeling charitable. He lived among the cargo like a dragon among gold, counting, guarding, muttering. The holdmaster was part accountant, part philosopher, part ghost. You could never quite tell when he was awake or asleep. He'd appear suddenly beside you with a lantern and whisper, "Did you move that cask?" You'd say no. He'd nod knowingly and vanish back into the shadows. Some swore he never left the hold. that he ate dried peas and drank condensation. Others said he kept a journal written in code, tracking which crates creaked louder than others, a secret language of wood and motion. Truth is, the hold was a world unto itself. When the sea rolled, you could hear it breathing, the deep, slow groan of wood against weight. Every shift, every knock told you something. A good holdmaster could diagnose the ship's mood by sound alone, and in long voyages, when the rest of the crew began to lose their tempers or their wits, he stayed calm, because he understood the rhythm of confinement. Down there, surrounded by barrels of salted pork and the faint sound of water sloshing in the bilge, you learned patience. You learned that waiting was its own kind of work. I once spent 2 weeks trapped below deck during a storm, helping a holdmaster named Briggs secure the cargo. He barely spoke, just listened. When I finally asked what he was listening for, he said, "Leaks, lies, and ghosts." I never figured out which he feared most. By the time we resurfaced, I understood something I hadn't before. Every ship carries voices in its belly, not literal ghosts, but memories. Every groan of timber is a story retelling itself. Every drip, every sigh of wind through a crack is a reminder that nothing at sea is ever truly silent. The hold is where you realize you're sailing not just on water, but on time. And time, sailor, is the most unpredictable current of all. So, as the ship rocks gently beneath us now, remember the strange souls who kept it alive. The powder monkey, the loblolly boy, the rat catcher, the purser, the parson, the thief, the boatswain's mate, the lookout, and the holdmaster, each one part of a grand, rickety orchestra. Without them, there'd be no voyages, no discoveries, no stories, just empty water and wind. And here we are, sailor. The watch is done. The deck's gone quiet. Even the sea sounds sleepy now. Its rhythm slower, softer, like it's rocking you deliberately toward dreams. We've drifted through centuries tonight, through cannon smoke, salt air, laughter, and superstition. Through men and women who took on jobs so absurd, so specific, so human, that they kept the world moving one wave at a time. Maybe that's the point of it all. Every life is a strange job when you think about it. Some of us haul rope, some chase rats, some count barrels in the dark, and some, like you and me, just keep watch for whatever drifts our way. The sea doesn't judge, she just listens. And tonight, she's listening still, patient, endless, humming low beneath the rain. So, close your eyes. The ship's safe. The tide's steady. Whatever storms you've weathered today can rest in the calm beyond the rails. If you're still awake, that's all right. You don't have to try to sleep. Just let yourself drift. The ocean will do the rest. Good night, sailor. I'll keep watch till morning.